The Joe Rogan Experience.
That's a tough one to answer. I was starting to see the humanity in others. Like after I moved to Detroit in December of '07, and Detroit's a majority minority city or non people of different races. So I'm having more interactions with people of other races. By 2016, I'd met Daryl Davis, and like I said, I didn't know I was meeting Daryl Davis, but
How'd you guys meet?
it was for a film, for Daryl's film, Accidental Courtesy.
Okay, right.
So they had reached out and they explained the show, and I said, okay, because any opportunity to spread the propaganda of the movement, I'm going to do it, unless it was like Jerry Springer or something. So it sounded legit. I agreed to it. Didn't know I was meeting Daryl. I still would have done it, but I would have probably prepared to debate this guy because I knew who he was. I knew he was pulling people out of the movement. And so this was at a place called Chris's Hot Dogs in Alabama, where Hank Williams had written the song. It was "Hey, Hey, Good Looking You" right there, right?
About a waitress.
Right. And my girl and I were sitting outside, and Daryl steps out of a vehicle, and I'm thinking, I recognize this guy. He comes up, shakes my hand, we shake hands, and he says, "Hi, I'm Daryl Davis. You must be Jeff Schoepp." And I'm thinking, where do I know that name from? Where do I know his face? It didn't quite register because I'm just thinking about, this debate that we're going to get into. And then after we sat down, it clicked. I was like, oh, this is the guy that gets people out of these organizations. So at this point, I'm the head of the National Socialist Movement, and Daryl and I are getting along great. We're talking about music. We're talking about all these kind of things, and it clicks in my head, oh, wow, I'm getting along too well with this guy. He's the enemy, or so-called enemy. He's on the other side. So I better step it up here. So I pound my fist on the table, and I said, Daryl, I'll fight to the last bullet for my people.
Yeah. And Howard, prior to us getting together, the producer and director of the documentary is called Accidental Courtesy. They asked me, they followed me around the country. I was conducting interviews with KKK members, Black Lives Matter, and different, people. And they said, do you know Jeff Schoepp? And I said, I know who he is. I've never met him. Would you be open to talking with him and interviewing him? I said, sure. So they contacted him. And then they let me know, okay, we were down in Alabama at the time. He's going to come down to Alabama. You can interview him tomorrow. And went to this place called Chris's Hot Dog Stand, or Chris's Grill, whatever, where Hank Williams made famous. And we're going to do this interview in there. So they said they got me a rental car, put me in the hotel, and said, we're going to get everything set up. We'll have Jeff here, and we're going to film you when you first come in and meet Jeff. We want to catch that on camera. Then you'll sit down across from him in the booth and interview him. I said, okay, fine. So I go to the hotel, wait for their call. They call and say, okay, we're ready. So I get in this rental car and I drive to the grill. And when I pull up, I see who looks like Jeff sitting on this bench out front with this girl. So I'm thinking, well, that can't be him because he's supposed to be inside sitting in the booth. So I just sat in the vehicle, looking at him, just trying to figure this out. Maybe he came out for a smoke or something like that. I'm watching him. He's not going inside. So I got out, and when I got out and started walking towards him, I think, that is the dude. I'd never met him, but I knew what he looked like. I said, I wonder why he's out here. So I went over. I said, hey, are you Jeff Schoepp? He goes, yeah. I said, I'm Daryl Davis. Shook his hand. He introduced me to his lady friend. And I said, I thought you were supposed to be inside. He goes, well, I was inside. I just came out or whatever. So we walk in. Of course, they didn't get to capture the moment that we met. So they're like all freaked out and stuff. And we sat down in the booth and I started interviewing him. And as he pointed out, he was getting along too well with me. Just chit-chatting, talking about music and this, that, and the other. And he's saying, he was a musician. I said, I'm a musician. And I said, well, what kind of music do you like? What kind of music do you play? Well, I play rock. And I said, well, rock was invented by black musicians. Oh, let's not go there. Elvis Presley invented rock. I said, no, Elvis did not invent rock, right? I said, Chuck Berry invented rock, right? And he goes, okay, well, you probably know more about music than I do, So, but what difference does it make, what color the musician is? I said, well, it doesn't make any difference to me. But obviously it makes a difference to you because, in our history books, we talk about Ben Franklin. Who cares what color Ben Franklin is? If he invented electricity, he invented electricity, right? And he goes, well, yeah, well, I know about the guy who invented peanut butter. And I said, okay. I'm serious. And I said, okay, what's his name? He thought about it. He goes, Carver. I said, what's his first name? He said, George Washington Carver. I said, okay, very good. I shook his hand, right? And so then, what did he say? He, he runs the NSM, National Socialist Movement, and the whole white supremacy ideology is called the movement, right? So anyway, I said, well, he goes, I said, it's a racist movement. He said, no, it's like a white civil rights movement for white people. He goes, you got the NAACP. And I said, yes. I said, but there are white members of the NAACP. Can I join the NSM? He goes, no. And, I said, well, why not? Well, then it's a racist movement. And then we got into it, and he goes, I will fight to the last bullet for my people. I'm like, whoa. He just kind of flipped out here. I said, okay.
Did you do that because you were realizing that you were getting a little too friendly with him?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
That's so funny. Like, I'm keeping my ideology no matter what.
Yes.
That's funny. You're not going to trick me by me being a cool guy.
We laugh about it now, but at the time I was pretty stressed out.
I would imagine.
Yeah, because I realized it. But
So what year was this?
2016.
16. Yeah. Daryl, what was the first year you came on the podcast?
Oh, gosh.
Kind of around then, right?
Yeah, 15 or 16.
Yeah. So how many other different things had you done where he had known about you? Had you done like a lot of different interviews, a lot of different?
Yeah.
Back then?
Yeah. I've been, doing a lot of interviews, magazines, and
so
newspapers.
you guys were just very aware of anybody who was like fucking up the cause.
Yeah.
With their awesome personality.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. You're in this movement, and you've got a guy that's pulling people out, and he's not just pulling out just anybody. Some of these people
Grand Wizards,
Grand Dragons, and Imperial Wizards. Yeah,
Wizards and Dragons is fucking hilarious. By
right.
the way.
So after the thing was over, they're meandering around, getting their cameras packed up. I pulled Jeff aside and just talked to him, just one-on-one, man-to-man, no cameras, whatever. And we just talked about a couple of different things, talked about women and this, that, and the other, and just what guys talk about.
Normal.
Yeah, and we exchanged phone numbers, and then the following year, 2017, he was involved in that large white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, that turned deadly. And I knew a lot of the people who were involved in there, including
that was the one when the guy in the car ran over people in the crowd?
Yes. And I know the guy who organized that thing. He's been in my house. I've sat down with them. I've been in some of their homes, et cetera. And I've gotten wind that Jeff was rethinking. I said, what? Let me stop reading all this stuff and find out for myself. So I found his number that he'd given me. And fortunately, he still had the same number. I called him up, and we he remembered me, of course, and we chatted on the phone. And then I had we stayed in contact, and then in 2020, I had a gig up in New York City, and they booked me and said, talk about how you meet these people and what you all talk about and what they think about this. I said, well, wait a minute. I can tell you about how I meet them and how I go about it, but as far as what they think about stuff, I can tell you, but that'll be secondhand. I say, if you want, I can bring people, because every now and then I bring a former Klansman that I took out of the movement or whatever to talk, answer questions. I say, well, how about if I just bring somebody? Whoa, we got to clear that with the sponsors or whoever. So they got back to me and said, yeah, who do you want to bring? I said, well, let me give you some options or whatever. So I called Jeff. I said, would you be willing to come out and talk about, your experiences, what got you in, what got you out, et cetera? And he said, yeah. So I called him back. I said, okay, I got this guy. He was the commander of the largest neo-Nazi organization in the country for 25 years. He was a 27-year member. And they said, okay, fine. So I called Jeff back and said, "Okay, you're on, man. They're going to fly you out to New York, and you'll come on." And this is the first time we'd ever done anything together like that, where we both are on the same page, right? And it went over very, very well. And that was the last gig either of us had before everything got shut down for COVID.
Now, when you said you're both on the same page, what do you mean by that?
Well, both in the same mindset. He's not fighting to the last bullet for his people. He's fighting for all people. He realizes that what he had experienced for 25 out of the 27 years he was a member, he no longer wanted to do.
And so when exactly was that shift for you?
So I broke free from the movement in March of 19. But I was going through this process for several years. So typically you want somebody in like the work that we do, we want someone to disengage from the movement, and then we work on the de-radicalization part. My journey was backwards. So I'm de-radicalizing while I'm still involved. Now, if somebody would have told me that while I was involved, those would have been fighting words, but it was basically like the mind wasn't catching up with what was going on. So that's when I was starting those last years when I was involved. I'm saying this is a white civil rights group. It's not a hate group. And from the outside looking in, you go, man, this guy's insane. Of course it's a hate group, and I see that now, obviously.
Tell them about your girlfriends who told you it was a cult.
Yeah. So when I was involved, every girl that I was seeing, and I was seeing quite a few different women, just about every one that if they would come and check out the movement, they would say, whoa, this is like a cult, and you're like a cult leader. And I'm thinking in my head, what is wrong with these choices I'm making in women? What is with these poor choices? You know what I mean? Like
right.
That's a serious cognitive dissonance. But that's the thought that goes through your head is like it's not me.
So was it initially meeting Daryl that started this journey for you?
Yes, it was one of the major first seeds.
But you guys hadn't seen each other for quite a while, and then on your own, you just started exploring these ideas and changing your perspective.
Well, that, and then not long after meeting Daryl, I met a Muslim filmmaker by the name of Dia Khan, and in her film, White Right Meeting the Enemy, and I'd gotten to know Dia quite well over the course of that filming, and there was a number of people that left the NSM from interacting with Dia, and she has a very similar approach to how Daryl Davis approaches things. It's about listening, it's about being curious, it's about asking questions and sharing different perspectives, and that curiosity and that sincerity, it can help restructure the way someone thinks and the way they see people. So like Dia says to me, and this is actually in the film White Right Meeting the Enemy, you can see the change. Like I show the clip a lot of times at my talks, and I'll tell the audience, I'll say, take a look at my eyes in that clip because you can see it. The cameraman caught it, zoomed in on my eyes. She's saying, the ideology that you, instead of telling me that I was wrong, she showed me, she says, the ideology that you stand for, the things that you believe in, they made me feel less than, ugly, not worthy. As a child growing up, that's how I felt. That's how your ideology made me feel. And no one aside from Daryl Davis had ever approached me with anything like that. I was told I was wrong, but that human connection, when you dehumanize another human being, you lose your humanity in that process. And I'd lost my humanity a long time ago. And what Daryl and Dia did is they cracked that door open, that window to compassion, and I could see their humanity. Daryl did something very similar. He told me about how racism and hate affected him as a child growing up. That hurt. That hurt. I mean, I'm not going to say it at the time when I'm still in the movement,
right.
But on the inside, it really hurt. That bothered me. It's like, this is not this noble, grand cause that I believed it was if it's causing that kind of pain and suffering to other people.
So what were the steps that you had to take before you were ready to leave the movement?
I had to try everything, and I beat myself up over that a lot, but I kept saying, it's a white civil rights group. I'm telling every press outlet I'm sitting down with when they're in, don't call us a Nazi group. It's a white civil rights organization. Of course, most of them wouldn't publish that because it is what it is. But I'm going through these different changes. I'm having rules put into the organization where the last couple of years they changed from the swastika in the public view to using an old runic symbol, the Odal rune. today they switched back. They use the swastika again. But I was doing things like that to try to change the image of the group. As my own beliefs were shifting, I was trying to shift that into the party. And eventually I was like, because as a man, I thought, I'm going to fix this. I got to fix this, this mistake that I made, this terrible movement. I've got to fix it. And there's no fixing it. All I was doing was putting lipstick on a pig, dressing up the Nazi Party, trying to make it look pretty. It still is what it is. So eventually, after 2019 rolls around, I was like, I have to get away from this.